show that we're doing with Dr. Robert Muller, who is the former Assistant Attorney General to the United Nations for, well, 3 or 4 decades, and he is the Chancellor of the University for Peace. And we thank you for staying, Dr. Muller, and agreeing to do this second show. While we were paused between the taping of the first and the second show, you said a couple of things to me that I think I would like to ask you to repeat for the benefit of our viewers. Number one was what you feel the UN has been able to accomplish, and certainly you have the overview, having been there how many years? 40?
40, yes.
40 years. And what do you feel are their major accomplishments?
Well, maybe I will speak from a personal point of view. There has been a whole list which was published for the delegates in San Francisco on the 50th anniversary, but from a very personal point of view, I remember that when I came to the UN as a young man, I was told that the decolonization of the world was the major item and that it would take between 100 and 150 years. Well, it took 40 years. There are no longer any colonies on this planet anymore.
There are none?
They're not finished. Decolonization is completed. Then we had...
Everybody has home rule now.
Everybody has home rule. There are a few people who would descend from inside, but that is the problem where in Yugoslavia they want to become a nation too. But what were former colonies, that's all finished. In 40 years instead of 100 to 150 years.
So things are accelerating.
Sure. The Trusteeship Council, which was dealing with countries under trust, can be closed. There's no business anymore. It's finished. As a matter of fact, we're thinking now, what can we do with the Trusteeship Council under the Charter? Number two, I was told that the Cold War would never end. Well, it ended. I was told that apartheid in South Africa will never end. It is finished. We have a black and white government in South Africa. It is incredible what I have seen happen in those 50 years. I was told that the UN would die within 5 years. It is now complete with 185 nations around the world.
And
it's
50 years.
Yeah. I was told that there is likely to be another war on the planet. There has been no world war under the most dramatic and dangerous circumstances you can imagine. So that today I become optimistic because I think today people tell me this is impossible, this is impossible, this is impossible. And maybe in 50 years from now people said they thought it was impossible, but it was possible. So really I'm amazed at what we were able to accomplish, while then in the meantime new problems have crept in, like the environment and like population.
Well, what do you see as the future of the UN?
Well, in my opinion, to tell you the truth, it is more than a political organization. It is more than a social and economic organization. It's a biological organism of the human species in its totality, where all our preoccupations, all our evolution, the Earth even speaks in the UN, where we will have to find our harmony with the Earth, our harmony among ourselves. It is a biological phenomenon. It's no longer a political phenomenon. It's, in my opinion, the most important institution that has ever been created in the entire human history. That is my conviction, and this I hope it will be its future if the people who believe that the UN is wrong and should be finished, if they do not win.
Now, before we turn the cameras on, you were telling me that there is a lot of worry in the United States that we will surrender our sovereignty, do away with our Constitution, be taken over by the UN, have foreign troops on our soil. There are articles appearing in major magazines, and there is genuine concern here. Would you address that problem, please?
Well, to tell you the truth, since I'm in favor of world peace and world cooperation, I'm no longer worried about the UN. If this had happened, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been very worried. Now I'm no longer worried. Why? Because if the UN is not strengthened and allowed to be the world order of tomorrow, the world order of tomorrow will arise in Europe. Why? Because we have a European community where the borders have disappeared. where we have elections to a parliament, where the European community has a budget of $70 billion in the first year. And now 4 northern countries have joined. In a year or two, you are going to have Russia, the 16 former republics of the East who will get in. And when it comes to Kyrgyzstan and others, the European community will be in Asia. And then the temptation for the Chinese to join the European community and the Japanese to join, because Europe is not the little Europe, it is Eurasia. You have one continent that goes from the eastern coast to Asia. And the dream of my compatriots in Lorraine and Alsace-Lorraine, who wanted to make a peaceful Europe, their dream, the dream of Robert Schuman, was Eurasia and Eurafrica. In other words, that the European countries should take care of Africa. Those who colonize...
Isn't this colonization?
No, to help them economically. They are not there anymore. But these people are very poor, nobody takes care of them.
In other words, to take from them, no, but to help them, yes.
To help them now to get on their things. So you have Eurasia, you have Eurafrica, and then the latest phenomenon is that the South Americans are less interested in NAFTA. They have created Mercosur, namely a South American common market, and now they are beginning to dream of preferring to join the European community. They're all Portuguese and Spanish origin, and to forget about North America. Therefore, if really the criticism of the extreme right of the United States continues, if they say, let's leave the UN, I'm no worry. We will pack up, we will take United Nations, put it in Europe, the city of Bonn is completely empty, they're looking for an international organization, and then the world order around the European Union and United Nations will be in Europe, and the United States will have lost the leadership which a man like Franklin Roosevelt had. That is the danger with these attacks against the UN. But I'm not worried, because we are going to have a world order, and even a better one than United Nations, because it will be built on what my friends have done in Europe. And I think they better think about this in Washington, because this danger is absolutely around the corner.
Where does this leave the United States? What message are you trying to tell our citizens?
To go back to the dream of Roosevelt, namely that the United States, by creating its United States, where New York was fighting New Jersey, it took 10 years to get the United States Constitution. Washington had the same trouble in the United States as we had in the world. Benjamin Franklin was sitting there not even thinking that he would ever agree to a constitution. I have read the debates of in Philadelphia. They're worse than anything people have said to each other in the United Nations. And still today...
You mean to get the 13 colonies to come together?
Absolutely, it was horrible. And here we have now a United States that functions well. And my dream and the dream of Roosevelt was that since they established a balance of power, a democracy, that the United States could become the model of the world of tomorrow. And this is why Roosevelt and Truman and Wilson, they were dreaming that the world order of tomorrow would be developing on American soil. Well, if they don't like it, we'd start it somewhere else. And we have now a fantastic basis in Europe to do this, and then we will have a world order that will emanate from Europe. So I'm no longer worried about all these attacks of the US.
How are we going to get people to cooperate, say, in the Near East, where you have the Jewish and the Arab factions at each other? This has been going on 4,000 years.
Sure, but if tomorrow they become members of the European community, they will have a system whereby they have to resolve it.
And you think they'll be able to?
Oh, of course.
Well, what I'm getting from what you said is the United States either better participate or they're going to be left out.
Oh, definitely. That is now the danger. That is now the danger. Has never existed before, because before there was never any alternative to the UN. But now, if the US no longer likes this, there is the alternative, and a much better one, which is a united Europe, which then becomes the united world by extending to Asia, to Africa, and to South America. And the United States will be hanging high left alone in the world, having missed the opportunity of creating a world order, a decent democratic world order on American soil. If Franklin Roosevelt would be here, I think he would get out of his tomb. He couldn't understand what is going on. And Wilson too. Those were dreamers. Those were people who had a vision into the future. We're on the eve of the third millennium. We have to have a vision for the future. and not have things like this. United Nations has to be strengthened. Truman said it. At the time of the elections of Truman, and the strengthening of the United Nations had the popular support of the Americans, and even today you have almost 70% of the American people who believe that strengthening of the United States is a priority issue.
Let's say this happens.
Yeah.
Do you see that World Association, headquartered in Europe or wherever, using force to get compliance?
Well, they will have to organize a world security system around the European system. In other words, they will create a European army or something of this sort. By the way, the question of the armies is going to diminish in any case, because now the first priority is to find a world security system where you do not need automatically armed intervention. Already in Latin America, you have the Organization of American States, where if a country is demilitarized like Costa Rica and now also Panama, if anyone attacks these countries, the Organization of American States immediately intervenes. So that you can have a regional organization that will allow people to demilitarize. There's a lot of going on about a better world security system. You have even the latest proposal I saw is a world insurance system in the United Nations, where you would ask a little country to say, if you pay a premium of so much, you don't need the military, we will ensure your security. With the United Nations force, you see?
Well, this United Nations force, I think that word force or compliance or military intervention frightens people.
Well, it doesn't have to frighten them, because in the United Nations, as distinct from Europe, you have the veto power. You cannot have any military operations of the UN which is not agreed upon by the 5 permanent members in the Security Council. The Secretary General cannot send a force in the world. He has no power. This is the power of the Security Council. And the United States just puts its veto and nothing happens. The UN was not intervening in Vietnam. The UN was not allowed to intervene in Nicaragua. The UN was not allowed to intervene in Cambodia because the United States says no. And that's it. So what can the United States fear of a United Nations where it has the veto power to say no to anything that is a military action? I cannot understand it. These people are just inventing the most incredible things. They don't know how the UN functions and what the power of the United States is in the UN.
Then we need to do something to make the people here at home understand how it functions.
Absolutely.
And participate in that functioning in a positive way.
That's right.
Is that the message we're trying to send?
The UN is not known to the people. The media are not interested. They only report on the UN when something is wrong.
I see. We need to pause for a brief public service announcement. Please stay with us. We'll be right back, and we're going to talk about the University for Peace. Back to Adventures in Life. I'm Earl Beecher, your host. Our guest is Dr. Robert Muller, who is the Chancellor for the University for Peace. Dr. Muller was kind enough to supply me with a list of some 13 books that he has written. Most of all, they taught me happiness. That came out of World War II, I believe. New Genesis, Shaping of Global Spirituality, Dialogues of Hope. What War Taught Me About Peace. I like that title. That's an interesting one. The World Joke Book. Okay. Peace Through Laughter.
Yes.
The Birth of a Global Civilization, The First Lady of the World, a novel. Decide To. And he brought some of these books. Here is Decide To, and this is one of the more recent ones, isn't it, Dr. Muller?
It's one of the most popular ones. You know, decide to be happy, decide to be healthy, decide to do a good action every day, decide to forgive.
18 statements of things you decide and do.
Dear Abby, every February publishes my poem or my exhortation, Decide to Forgive. And now I have the great pleasure to see that 2 universities are now studying forgiveness, and that there will be a conference on forgiveness in Jerusalem in the year 2000.
Wonderful. Maybe we can get the Arabs and the Jews to settle their differences.
Try to forgive each other.
New Genesis, the shaping of global, what is the exact title?
Spirituality.
Spirituality. And you mentioned in the first show that you have come to a spiritual sense.
Yes.
And most of all, they taught me happiness. That's a favorite of mine. I like that title. And The First Lady of the World. This is a novel. Now, The First Lady of the World is the First Lady to be the head of the UN? Is that the concept within the book?
It is my concept. Well, in the book, it's a story of a woman who becomes the Secretary General of the UN, because in my opinion, the feminine in the world should be much more visible in the United Nations.
I think it might be interesting sometime to have a mother who wants to protect her children be in the key position and see what that does.
That's exactly it, because mothers do not want to see their children killed in a war.
No.
And I understand, by the way, that the Yugoslav women are will be asking for the fundamental human right of every mother not to see their son killed or be killed, not even in the name of a nation.
Now,
That's
there
amazing.
are some women's symposiums that have been and are taking place around the world. Could you tell us a little bit about a couple of them, maybe?
Well, the women's issue started at a very low key, but under the great leadership of Eleanor Roosevelt. And my wife came from Chile with her ideal women, because her father did not want her to go to university. And she happened to be the first doctor of law and the first diplomat of Chile. So she came to the UN, and she was a member of the same commission as Eleanor Roosevelt, and her whole life in the UN, as my ideal was peace, her life was women's rights. And then when she got Alzheimer's disease...
You two would be a powerful combination.
Absolutely.
Oh, boy. Yes.
So that when she got Alzheimer's disease and was unable to work anymore for the women's issue, I said, Margarita, I'm going to help you. I know that your ideal is that a woman should become Secretary General of the UN. So I wrote this book in which a woman becomes Secretary General of the UN, and which is dedicated to her. So it's a novel.
It's fictional.
It is fiction. Well, the woman comes from India. She arrives in the United Nations.
Why did you pick one from India?
Well, because the next, it's now the turn of India to get the Secretary General, of Asia, to get the Secretary Generalship. There's a kind of rotation. So if Boutros Ghali is not re-elected, then it will be the turn of Asia this time. So I invented that she comes to New York, and she visits the building, and she asked one of the assistants there of the guards, said, look, my God, this is a very complicated affair, and can I trust the people here in this complicated political affair? Do you know someone I could trust? And then one of the guards says, yes, I know an old guy who's retired in Costa Rica at University for Peace. Why do you call him?
I wonder who you could possibly be referring to with that one.
So I used my French name of the underground, Louis Parisot, which is about as French as Muller can be German.
Yes.
And then I fly in, she sends me a cable, and then together we make peace.
I see. Now that you have all this power, and you have her attention, and as we were closing the first show, we were talking about the issues of personal violence and so forth. Working through the University for Peace, you are advocating things that people can do to help settle the gang problems on the streets of L.A., for example, things of this nature. With all that political power, what do you recommend we address ourselves to doing to solve the problems that we have?
Well, in my opinion, the most important things which we could do at this juncture is to have a world conference on violence in all its forms and to look at the causes.
Is this what they're doing at Beijing and San Francisco at the women's conferences that are...
Well, that is what the women's conference will certainly request in Beijing. There's no doubt about it.
How many people are coming to that?
36,000 women, can you imagine?
From all over the world?
From all over the world.
Okay.
You see, by the way, let me just say in passing that when we had the first World Environment Conference...
Oh, yes.
The word environment did not even exist. It was coined in my office when the government of Sweden came and said, Mr. Muller, we have acid rain, our lakes are getting polluted, we're the most advanced industrial country on earth, can the UN help? And I said, the only drum we have is a big conference. So we had the first World Conference on the Environment in Sweden, and just to show you what the UN can do, in 1972, in Sweden, there were only two heads of state, the one from Sweden and Indira Gandhi, who was around. There was not a single ministry or office on the environment on the entire planet. 20 years later, in Rio de Janeiro, there were 140 heads of state who attended. There were 40,000 people, and today there's not a single country on earth that does not have a ministry of the environment. So you can imagine what it means when the United Nations gives a warning that something goes wrong on the planet, the people follow. On population, when we discovered the population issue, at that time, I remember, There were 2.5 billion people, and we had no figures on this planet of world population until 1952.
We really didn't know what the third world countries had.
And we have never made the UN also one of the greatest things it has done is it has a total inventory of our planet. Every is now world statistics. When I entered the UN, I couldn't even get the world population figure. Today, the young people, they have everything at their disposal. They can become better managers of the planet. But when we discovered the world population explosion, at a figure of 2.5 billion at the time, the estimate...
This was how many years ago?
That was in 1952.
52, 40 years ago.
The estimates of the world population in the year 2000 were 8.3 billion people. They are down to 6.1. In other words, the warning given by the UN on the world population explosion have had as a result that we have prevented the birth of 2 billion, 200 million people. Now, nobody even noticed this. If we had not given the warning, if governments had not created in the poor countries population policies and ministries, we would have at least today 1 billion more people on this planet.
And especially in the poverty areas.
Oh, absolutely, because this, of course, because in the Western countries, world increases of population are very slow. As a matter of fact, in the rich countries, in the United States, you're going to have another problem, which is major, and to which we have drawn attention, is the aging of the population.
That's true.
You are going to have an aged population in the West, which is incredible.
We're having more senior citizens and fewer young people born. Now, the rest of the world, it's the opposite. The people aren't living as long. Is that it?
Look,
or is that there's more children being born?
In the poor countries, the longevity, thanks to health, thanks to eradication of epidemics, the longevity in the poor countries has gone from 40 years to 60 years.
And in just the 40-year period you're talking about.
And in the rich countries, it is 72 years now. Can you imagine? That's the average longevity.
And it used to be about 60 or 64.
Exactly. So that we have to watch out, because in the poor countries now, we're going to have not only a problem of overpopulation, but we're going to have a problem of aging. So you see...
Well, that's part of the increase in the population, is the fact people are living longer, plus the increase in the birth rate.
Exactly. Now, the birth rate has never increased on this planet.
Oh, it hasn't?
No. It is, we saved the children from dying. You see, in the 50s, we went with President Truman's point 4 with World Health Organization, the preoccupation we should save children. But it didn't occur to anyone to tell to these parents, you used to have 6 children so that when you were old you had 2 left because the others died, so you don't need to have. Then we discovered that the mortality rate collapsed from 34 per thousand to 14 per thousand. So the population explosion was not provoked by a greater fertility. The fertility of women has already gone down. It was caused by more children surviving. And then, of course, the kids in a developing country survive. And when you go from the United States to Costa Rica, you're going to find most of the young people in the street. And they are highly reproductive because they like to make love. That's the situation.
And there is a desperate need for education throughout the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is this the real mission that we should be addressing?
Oh, absolutely.
Is educating the children worldwide?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, see, I came out of education. That's a hot spot with me. I love to hear you talk about it.
We have to give right from the beginning to the children a vision of the home into which they're born. And the home into which they're born is the planet. And the family in which they're born is a population of today of 5.6 billion people. And the time span for which they are going to live, and the miracle each one of them represents, physically, mentally, morally, and spiritually. To tell every child you're a miracle. Now, this is the world into which you are born, and this is the world where you have a function to perform. So that a doctor, when he's a doctor, he's not only a doctor for a few people, he's part of the totality. His contribution to health is a contribution to the health of the planet. This is the new education which we need. I was educated by the French. I had to learn every river, every affluent, every province of France. The world was low down there.
Oh, yes.
And then, of course, comes a German, when they occupied us, said everything you've been taught is a lie. The French are decadent, and then I had to learn the German rivers, the German heroes, the German victories, the German language, and so on. And then I had a doctorate of law, and I arrived in the United Nations. The Americans scoffed at me. How could you have studied law? You should have studied economics. That's the big thing. So I went to Columbia University to get the degree of economics. And you know what I discovered later on is that the only place on earth where I got a right, decent, objective education was the United Nations itself. Because there I was taught about the total world and about the total humanity, and that before you speak of France, you have to look at the 5.6 billion people, of which France is only a small part, and that we have all to work together in one human family. This is another miracle which is produced by the UN, to have enlarged our concept, and our nation is not always first. You see, we had France first and then Germany first, you know, Deutschland über alles. That was the whole thing.
Yes.
And they even had buckles on their thing, God mit uns, God with us. They were killing each other in the name of God.
I know.
What kind of a planet? We have really, we cannot accept this anymore.
We're out of time again. Thank you for being with us on Adventures in Life, because I think it's been an adventure to enjoy your overview of what's happening in life on our planet. Please join us again.